Hello, everyone.
Sorry, John, I missed you.
Hi, Bobby. This is John.
Yeah, good to see you, John.
I got my son,
Uh, hello,
Matthew.
John.
How's it going?
Good.
Hi, Nancy. Hi,
Hi,
Mike.
how are you
Hi
not
there.
getting eaten alive by mosquitoes?
They don't exist out here yet.
Oh, wait, aren't you in North Carolina?
Well, we're in a new development, so
Oh, you
everything's
beat them.
with plowed. Everything's been plowed.
Good.
Yeah. No, I was out in the Sierras this summer, and I got eaten out alive more than I've ever been here. So California mosquitoes are wild.
Yeah, we have a new species here too. It bites your ankles.
Oh, yeah, that's where where my troubles were.
It's crazy. So we're gonna record this. I'll edit it and send it out when we're done for people who Cindy was on the call at 6 o'clock. So I sent her a message and said it's at 6:30. So I might have to email it to her.
Yeah, your message said 6:30.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, good. Well, yeah, I'll record it and we'll just wait maybe 5 minutes. Bobby, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you're up at Clear Lake, Bobby?
Yeah, up in Clear Lake. We're actually not in Clear Lake proper. We're on, if you're familiar with the area, we're on Cobb Mountain. So we're up in the trees more. But it's such a nice area. We before we moved in on a house, we came up here just to kind of check it out, and it's just really beautiful. Small town that's basically summer resort for people. And there's lots of trees around. Everybody's been very welcoming and nice with us in the area. So we're really enjoying it and feel like it's a good spot for us to be.
Great.
Yeah. And
No
we're only an
clears
hour and a
there.
half from Napa.
Congratulations on the wedding, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, we had a
And the
really
move.
nice.
Are you back from England? I just told him you were in England.
Yeah, I got back last night.
Oh,
And
okay.
I started classes today.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, my wife wanted to see Taylor Swift, and it was cheaper for us to fly round trip to England and see the show than it was just to buy the Taylor Swift tickets in the United States.
Oh my gosh.
So we went for a sort of somewhat impromptu, uh, trip to London for 3 days. That was a whirlwind. I'm I'm going to be cooking dinner for my kids while I'm listening, so I'll make sure to mute and turn off my camera so I'm not distracting people. But it's good to see y'all.
Yeah, good to see you too, Sean. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
First, see, Nancy, you could have gone to England for your elective surgery and could have probably afforded to see a Taylor Swift concert during
Yeah.
your recovery.
Well, I know it's cheaper in Panama. I've done that already.
Wait, have you already done that? Like you went to Panama for a surgery?
No, I ended
Or
up in the emergency room in Panama.
that was the emergency one,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay. What does that say?
That was cheaper than staying in the hospital here for a 2-hour surgery. Being in the hospital for 5 days in Panama was cheaper than that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My kid, my 12-year-old got admitted this summer for one night because he had a stomach bug that he was so dehydrated that they had to hold him overnight. And the cost, if we didn't have insurance, it was like $35,000
Yeah.
or $45,000 for one night of observation. It was insane. So yeah, maybe Panama's a good option.
Well, it is a health destination that they have hospitals for Americans.
Oh
to
wow,
go down there. Yeah. I was in a
Interesting.
Johns Hopkins affiliate hospital.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was good. All right, 6:35. All right, we're gonna get started. George, thank you so much for coming. Nice to see you. And let's see who else is here. Mike and John and Heather
And Matthew.
and Matthew. Hi, Cindy. Cindy's back on again. That's good. Okay. So I just have a couple of quick things I wanted to mention. One, Don's not on the call, but Don and Lauren and Sam and Debbie and Sarah all did stints at the OC Fair for the last month, representing Pismo clams and abalone and kelp. So I wanted to thank them for being out there and wearing silly costumes and talking about what we do, so that lots of people could learn about our projects. I have an update on the abalone program. I am submitting a proposal to plant abalone outside the MPAs, because at the current time the Department of Fish and Wildlife is not accepting proposals for doing any restoration in marine protected areas. And so I'll keep you updated on that. And lastly, our clam surveys will resume in November. So stay tuned on that. And we are planning to have a clam spawn in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned about opportunities to be involved with that as well, if you've ever wanted to see clams having fun. So anyway, without further ado, like I said, I'm recording this. So if you stay tuned for a few days, I'll email you the recording so that you can hear Bobby give an update on our Pismo clam survey season. And Bobby has moved to the North Coast, so I don't know that he'll be clamming anymore, but hopefully we'll be still working together on data and hopefully to work on this final publication as well. So Bobby, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. Everyone see that okay?
Yeah,
Perfect. Great. Let's get started.
Oh, before we start, is everybody muted? Okay, sounds like it. Good.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. Today, talking about a multifaceted approach to understanding and restoring Pismo clam populations in Southern California. These are some of our collaborative research and findings from the past year. So we know all about Get Inspired. They've been working on community-based restoration efforts in Orange County for over 20 years, and the most current project is for Pismo clams. These are some of our partners in this project. And we are grateful to be able to work with all of them and collaborate in laying the groundwork for future restoration of Pismo clams in Orange County and beyond. As I mentioned, this is a multifaceted approach, so it takes all of these organizations working on various different projects to fully understand the extent to which we need to restore Pismo clams in Orange County, and all these parts together will allow us to be successful in that effort. So Pismo clam is an iconic California species. They grow typically 5 to 6.5 inches in length, and they are known to have variable coloration. They come in 3 main color morphs on the screen, and they typically inhabit sandy intertidal habitat on flat, wave-exposed beaches, and they're typically 2 to 3 inches deep. And they're found historically from Stinson Beach to Magdalena Bay in Baja California. Historically, Pismo clams supported a commercial fishery, which operated until 1947 when it was closed. Currently statewide, Pismo clams are not listed as threatened or endangered. However, in recent decades, populations have experienced significant decline in their density, but we are seeing in some areas, such as Pismo Beach, California, it's common knowledge now that there are legal-sized Pismo clams. And statewide, the recreational fishery is still open with regulations in place, depending where you are. And Pismo clamming used to be a popular pastime for beachgoers in Orange County. The Department of Fish and Wildlife conducted surveys in Orange County between 1975 and 1977, when they were trying to better understand the effects of sea otter foraging and sport fishing on the Pismo clam population. And during these surveys, fish and wildlife scientists surveyed groups with about the number of digging implements that they were using, usually like a potato fork. They also recorded the time of each person spent clamming and recorded the clam sizes. And this will be important for later on when we look at historical comparisons. The story goes that populations of Pismo clams in Orange County started declining in the 1970s, and after the El Nino from 1982 to 83, the sentiment was that there simply weren't enough to make it worth going out looking for them anymore. So these are the main objectives of our study, which is to conduct a baseline assessment of current clam populations, employing our new sampling technique, as well as new for this year, which is resurveying index sites, which I'll talk about more on the next slide, and comparing our current findings to historical records. So as you can see on the map, areas that along the coast that are highlighted in yellow is the proposed survey area that we want to get a baseline assessment of. These are the areas that have historically been surveyed by Fish and Wildlife in the past. This year, we did the area from the mouth of the Santa Ana River to the south side of the Huntington Beach Pier. And so I'm calling that for this year the Huntington Beach South site. And you'll notice that there are stars at what are the index sites, and these are sites that we previously found high densities of Pismo clams at, and that we plan to revisit in subsequent years as a representative sample of that area. Traditional survey techniques for Pismo clams usually entails what's known as the trench transect method, and this is the standard survey protocol used by the Department of Fish and Wildlife and our colleague Sean in his annual surveys. And for this technique, you dig a trench starting from the high tide line down to the lowest tide line possible in a given amount of time. And you sieve sand through a garden cart that's lined with 1/4-inch mesh, and you rinse out the sand to look for any small clams. And this is usually measuring recruitment strength of the year 1 cohort, so clams that recruited onto the beach and are now finally large enough to actually be able to see. The survey technique that we use is known as the longshore raking method, which typically we call ARM. There are some particular advantages with this survey technique. So when we do this, we have clammers line up in a line with garden rakes, and they clam in a straight line down the beach for about a couple hundred meters or so. This has a size selectivity for clams larger than 30 millimeters because that is the time spacing on the rakes. So it's possible that some clams could slip through that. One of the distinct advantages of this technique is that it has a greater spatial resolution along the shoreline. And we're typically able to go lower in the tide line than is possible during the time of a trench method survey. And due to the Pismo clam's tendency to orient perpendicular to the shoreline, we essentially are able, if there is a clam in the path of the survey, we essentially broadside it and are able to find it effectively. And this technique also mimics the technique used by clammers recreationally. This is a community-based project. As many of you are volunteers, you know how this works. What's important to note is that these surveys are directly comparable to historic data from Department of Fish and Wildlife, since we know the number of digging implements, time spent clamming, and we also measure every clam that we find. So when we do find a clam, we record its GPS coordinates. We have somebody measure its length, get the wet weight. We also take 3 representative sand samples from the survey where clams were found to better understand the conditions under which they prefer to be found and live. And we also have started recording beach elevation at the midpoint of each survey to understand the slope of the beach during each survey. Now for the exciting part. So this year, the Huntington Beach South surveys took place between October 2023 and ended in April 2024 across 14 surveys. In total, we found 300 clams, and if you look at the figure, on the x-axis is the length, and then on the y-axis we use clam density, which is clams per meter squared, and this allows us to normalize for differences in survey effort across surveys. So if we have a different number of clammers on a particular day, this allows us to account for that more effectively. And then the red dashed line vertically is the minimum legal size limit of Pismo clams, at least here in Southern California, which is 114 millimeters. So we found that the average length of the Pismo clams was around 68 millimeters. And this lines up with, excuse me. This lines up with our survey technique is more so for targeting larger, mature size classes of clams that are contributing to the spawning and reproduction from year to year. And we did actually find a couple of legal sized clams in our survey season this year, though the densities of them are considerably lower than what we're mostly finding. And then next is the resurveys of our index sites. The first one was at Bolsa Chica. And so in 2022, we did have relative success at the time, which we know can actually be better. In 2022, after we completed our survey, our colleague Sean actually recorded a large recruitment event of the smaller size classes of Pismo clams, and it was the largest that he had seen in the many years that he had been surveying. Then in March of 2023, we did resurvey this area again, but we did not find any clams, which is possibly because the beach was of a different slope, and because of the winter storms that year, we weren't able to get out as far as we would have perhaps liked, so that likely contributed to why we didn't see any that year. And then this year in April 2024, we actually found a record number for one survey. There was actually 5 to 7 foot swells recorded the previous day, so that may have shifted the sand in ways that were advantageous to us. And we were actually, some of you who were there were able to get out further than we have on these surveys before. There's a deep trough that's about waist height that forms before you're able to reach a sandbar, which is farther out on the beach and accessible during the low tide. And this year was very good. We actually found so many clams that clammers who were standing around waiting for their clams to be measured could reach down into the sand and grab handfuls of these clams again. And previously we had identified a gap between 60 to 80 millimeters of Pismo clams, and at the time we were considering the possibility that perhaps this was a poor recruitment year, but we do see that in 2024, just 2 years later, that gap was actually filled in. We see a very high density of Pismo clams in that size range, so they are growing and they are managing to survive long enough to that point of reaching that size. So it'll be interesting to continue to survey these index sites long term to determine if they're surviving to maturity. And it's interesting to note that in the one day of surveying the Bolsa Chica index site, the results actually very closely mirror the entire survey season for this year, which is good news for us. It's important that we do these baseline assessments of a region first so that we can understand the large big picture of it and be able to have a baseline that we can compare to over subsequent years. And the fact that the index sites reflect what we're seeing in the baseline surveys is good news, because now we're able to come back to these sites year after year and have a representative sample of that area, which will help us save on surveys each year. We also resurveyed Newport Beach, our Newport Beach index site, which we identified as having a high density of Pismo clams. After several continuous surveys of finding 0 clams, we came back to the site that previously had a relatively high abundance of clams for that area in January, or excuse me, that was originally in December, and then it was resurveyed in February after last year's winter storms. And then we did a follow-up survey in November, and what we do see is that across each survey, we're not necessarily seeing the exact same clams every time. So there is a possibility that they are moving around during their surveys, which is why in the November resurvey, we placed hit tags on these clams to come back to this year and see if we can find any of these previously tagged clams to understand how they're moving. And as mentioned earlier, our data is comparable to historic records from previous surveys done in the 1970s. And so these are the results. On the x-axis, I have year, and it skips about 40, 50 years between when surveys happened. And then on the y-axis is our clams per hour. And I'd like to make a note that the clams per hour calculation is for legal sized clams, which are 114 millimeters or larger. And then at the time, Department of Fish and Wildlife recorded the sublegal within 1 inch size of clams. So those are clams that are 3.5 to 4.4 inches. So any of our clams that are under that 1 inch legal size, so anything smaller than 89 millimeters, is not represented here. Though this does, based on the estimated legal and partially sublegal clams found in our surveys, this backs up the sentiment from people historically saying that there just were not enough to make worth going out and finding in the area. And our findings from this year at Huntington Beach are reflected in other sites as well, where catch of legal sized clams is as much as 2 orders of magnitude lower than historic estimates. And it's important to note that for Newport Beach in 1977, there was a large pulse in sublegal sized clams that people were finding, which could be a historic record of large recruitment events causing pulses in the Pismo clam populations over time. It was recorded that this could lead to increased poaching on that section of the beach. So, and that is something that is still experienced today. So that will be something to keep an eye on in the future. And lastly, starting in December of 2022, we started recording the colors of Pismo clams that were found in our surveys. And these are the results from when we first started recording the clam color morphs to the end of our most recent survey. And we found that the cream and brown color morphs were actually the most dominant. And occasionally the striped coloration, which we do find, makes up less than 5% of all of our clams observed. So finding one of those is very special and exciting, and we'll be continuing to monitor this in subsequent surveys. So something that we have noticed with our survey technique is that where with the transect method, it can take multiple years before you find substantial evidence of Pismo clam populations. We actually, within a matter of months, are able, using the alongshore raking method, to create a very comprehensive summary of an area that has been surveyed. And given the size selectivity of the alongshore method, although we do find a few clams that are under the cutoff of 30 millimeters, we still actually are able to find smaller clams in the survey, though we are more effectively finding the larger mature size classes that are contributing to the continued success of populations. And so Where the traditional trench transect method can fall off in finding these larger size classes, that's exactly where we're able to pick up. And so it's possible that by combining these survey techniques together, we're actually creating a more complete snapshot of clam populations. So in conclusion, Pismo clams do persist in Orange County, albeit at very low densities. And we found that our alongshore raking method is an effective survey technique for finding these Pismo clams. And by combining survey techniques with traditional methods, we're able to create a more complete snapshot. We also found that with the index sites this year, we found that Huntington Beach Pier was an area of extremely high abundance. So we will be adding that to our set of index sites that will be resurveyed after completing the baseline assessment. And if we'll be interested to monitor our existing index sites long-term to understand different annual variation in the densities of clams that we're finding, and hopefully this will be able to help us better understand which locations would be more preferable for restoration. And by conducting this research, we're laying the groundwork for a future successful restoration of Pismo clams in Orange County and beyond. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our volunteers. I wish I could have everyone listed, but according to Nancy, we had over 190 volunteers this year. So with each subsequent year, we're recruiting more and more people to help with these surveys and make this a successful project. So thank you to all of you, and especially to the people who are able to manage to come for every survey. Without you, this would not be possible and would not nearly be as successful. So thank you to all of you. And with that, I'll take any questions.